Hi,
Hello.
everyone.
Welcome to our show, Law Scholars, The Color of Law. And I'm one of two of your hosts, Deani Lee, rising freshman at George Mason University. Woo-hoo.
And I'm the second one of your hosts, Kennedy Wallace, a rising freshman at the illustrious Howard University.
um, and you're probably wondering, what is a law scholar? What does law stand for? Law stands for literacy as a weapon. And we use literacy as a weapon, exactly how it says. We learn information and we use that to educate ourselves as well as others. We use words as our weapons. Words are our weapons and knowledge. We use that to educate people and just spread the word.
But the Law Scholars couldn't be here right now if it was not for Clever Communities in Action. Clever Communities in Action is an organization that focuses on literacy rates, building community, serving the community, and all that type of good stuff.
Yes. And they also focus on systemic racism within our community and how we can better understand that to help empower our youth and everyone else around us. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our fellow law scholars.
So, hi, I'm Calissa. I am a rising senior, and I decided to be a law scholar because I wanted to give back to my community through education.
Hi, my name is Ure. I am a rising junior at Princeton High School, and I decided to become a law scholar just to learn more about my community and also give back to it in many ways.
Hey, I'm Selena. I'm 16 and I'm a rising junior at Fairfax High School. I decided to become a law scholar so I can educate myself and others on the things that directly affect us still today and the things that we should have learned in school.
Hi everyone, my name is Jordan. I am 15 years old. I'm a rising sophomore at Norby High School. The reason I joined Law Scholars was so that I could make a difference in my community and educate my community on the things that I learned from this program.
Before we get too deep into any conversation, I want y'all to see our beautiful shirts. Woo!
Yes, thank you so much, Kennedy. And the symbol you see on your shirt is Fahindu. Excuse me if I pronounced that wrong. I'm so sorry, but this symbol represents independency, which I think is so suited for who we are as individuals and what we stand for. We stand for ourselves and we are independent and we can do anything we set our minds to. So I absolutely love this symbol. I think I'm gonna put this up on my wall for college. How about you? How about you, Kennedy?
I think so too. First, I wanted to start off by explaining what The Color of Law is. The Color of Law is a New York Times book about redlining, the injustices, de jure segregation, and de facto segregation that occurred in this country. Calissa, did you have anything else to add?
So, I kind of wanted to start off by actually defining what redlining is. So, if anybody doesn't know what it is, it's basically when, sorry, I'm like mixing up my words right now. When you, oh my God. I am so sorry, y'all.
It's okay.
You're good,
You have a lot on your mind right now. Ure, did you want to fill in the gaps right quick?
So when we've been reading, we've learned about redlining, and what redlining is something that was put into place during the time of FDR that put certain areas were redlined, and those areas were not allowed to have certain things given to them. Lots of resources were deterred from that area, and most of those areas, almost all of them, were occupied by Black individuals, and those things definitely drifted down to like Black individuals today and how we are represented amongst the population. Calissa, did you happen to remember anything else?
Yeah, so I'm so sorry. I was
You're so good.
But basically, it's the systematic denial of resources like insurance and loans in areas that are deemed financially unfit or a financial risk. They would actually label these areas as hazardous and color code them. So those areas that were low income and predominantly African American would be labeled as hazardous and colored in red.
Hey, Jordan, did you have anything else to add about The Color of Law?
No, not really. They said everything about the book and redlining and what it's about. So I think we're all good.
All right. Let's go ahead and make way to our starting question. What are your general thoughts on the book and redlining? I know we talked about what it is, but what are you thinking about this book as we read it every week?
Well, personally, like it makes me really angry because of the fact that a lot of people, like around our age group, like non-Black people, they like to act like redlining doesn't exist anymore or like everything has been solved. But this book really opened my eyes and showed me how intentional it really all was, and like gave me like solid facts and sources that show that it is true and it is obvious and it's undeniable.
I think it was very interesting from my perspective because I've gone through things that redlining brings, such as gentrification and being displaced and evicted and things like that. So it definitely hit me personally. But to be able to understand the way that the government actually implemented resources and that they had agencies dedicated to segregating housing was definitely, I I guess it wasn't really surprising because I knew that there was some of it, but it did shock me a little bit of how far they went.
Yeah, I also have to agree. I also thought this book was very informative. It it really breaks down on how African Americans was treated and how the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, would deny African Americans mortgages because they were living in poor neighborhoods, but like they were trying to get out of those poor neighborhoods, and then they would not let them get into those neighborhoods because they were Black.
I feel like one thing that was really important is the fact that in the very beginning they mentioned the difference between de jure versus de facto segregation. And lots of people think it was mainly de facto, which is kind of the idea that people willingly segregated. But like everyone says, there were lots of laws in place that forced these segregations. And just lots of like lack of resources were given to the Black community, like Calissa said in the beginning. And I think it's really important because like we could see it trickle down to today, and how you could see that there is a correlation with race and poverty that was put into place because of our government.
Yes, everyone. I felt the same way. Like, Calissa, you mentioned that you felt shocked, and I felt the same way. I felt so angry. I felt so frustrated because all those things that I felt like I knew were true, I could see them. They were absolutely positively true. And it's so hard not to feel so frustrated. But that's why I became a law scholar, because I feel like not only does our youth need to know this, but the world needs to know what actually took place. Calissa, I know you mentioned that you wanted to show our viewers a very important map that connects us to Norfolk. So you can go ahead.
So hopefully this will work when I share my screen. Let me know if y'all can see that because I think you do have to put it up yourself.
You're good to go, Calissa.
Okay, I'm good. I'm good. Okay. So basically, the D5 area right here is kind of where we've been meeting in Norfolk because we meet in person every Saturday to talk about the book. And this area was historically redlined. It was deemed as hazardous. So we're looking at the D5 area right now, and then I'm going to go to a different map. So this map right here is showing you the Black population. So the Black population is yellow dots, and we're still looking at this D5 area. It's basically right in the center, and it's pretty much entirely Black, the entire population. So going to this map right here, we're looking at poverty rates. So this area is relatively low income, and that has to do with the redlining that they put in place and these systems that they put in place, because they wouldn't give out loans, and then they would have higher mortgages on Black people's houses so that they were forced to stay in these areas, and then these areas were redlined, so other people couldn't build there. They couldn't build businesses, they couldn't build more expensive houses, so these areas were basically resource deprived, and you're paying higher You're paying more for your home, essentially. So these areas became low income. They were forced to be low income.
Oftentimes a narrative is pushed that Black people are lazy, Black people, they just don't take care of themselves. But we see when we look at this map, this is all very intentional, and poverty was pushed into these communities. It was not there by accident. Thank you, Calissa, for showing us your map. Let me see. Sorry, everyone. There we go. Ure, did you have anything else to add about the map?
Yeah, I think it's really important that in our book we saw that some of these laws were in place in Norfolk up until the 80s. And I think lots of people tend to say stuff like slavery was a long time ago as if that was like the only thing that affected Black people. But these things like redlining did and does affect us to this day. And these were literally written into law with the words Black people in it. And I think it's really important to realize that when things like this happen, it will always have a long effect on us. And we can definitely see that today.
Yeah, so basically what you were saying, Ray, is a lot of what we saw from a long time ago, from like maybe like the 20s, really affects what has reflected and what has opened our eyes, what we're seeing nowadays in 2021. Like that's just crazy. It's been like it's been like plus 50 years, and we're still seeing the same things on repeat, just in a different form. What a lot of people would say a more modern form. And it's really eye-opening. Like one of our commenters had said previously, is very eye-opening in this book.
Not only Hi. Not only that, the effects of actually like being placed in like lower qualities of life has taken a lot of like emotional effect on Black people too. Like they like start to believe the things that society tells them, like they will never be enough or like they won't be able to do great things because
you start thinking that's all that there is in life, and that there's nothing more. But there's so much.
They know, and it's really sad to see a lot of people who don't believe or don't come into their potential because of it.
So are there any other are there any other connections you see from the past that impacted us today? So any other like things besides the way that they sectioned us in public housing, any other things we see from the past that are still affecting us today?
Well, obviously, like if you take a look outside, you can see the differences today between the quality of life in not red light areas and the hazardous areas. Like it's still like there, like nothing has really changed. No one has really left because that's where they grew up, that's their home. And also the lack of like you can take it away, but like the lack of generational wealth isn't really going to give you a lot of opportunity to actually grow out of it. So
A comment asked, did you learn much about these issues in school? Me personally, no. I've never heard of the word redlining or knew anything about it until I started reading this book and started asking questions. It was just never anything that I was open to in school.
I want to go back to what Selena said for a minute, kind of about how you can see it. So they put Black people into these public housing areas, and then they didn't give them opportunities. They didn't give them resources. In the book, there's a really good example of a guy named Frank Stevenson, I believe, if y'all want to look him up. He would go and commute to a Ford factory that took hours for him to commute to, just so that he could provide for his daughter and so that he could eventually get a house. And it took this man years and years and years to even be able to get a house that it's not like a mansion or anything. It was just a regular house. And then you go out and you see a lot of these public housing, you still see them, but now they're gentrifying them, and now they started building highways through them. So you see a lot of displacement, and then that causes homelessness. And it's kind of just a trend of Black people being put down so other people can be put up.
Another comment has asked, have you been sharing all this information with your peers? I personally have, because again, this book was very eye-opening. It was very shocking. It made me feel angry. It made me feel like I just had to tell the world about this. So I've been sharing this information with my peers, and this is why I'm here, and this is why I'm a law scholar, because I'm ready to share this information with our viewers and with the world.
Yes, exact same for me. I've been telling my mom every time I come home. I've been telling my best friend she can't. She kind of wants me to stop sometimes because I just keep going on and on about it. But I love to spread the word about it as much as possible.
Yeah, I think education is very important, especially because like the youth is who's going to be like the leaders of tomorrow. And I think especially when the government and some of our teachers and the curriculum is trying to keep things from us and kind of skew the truth to have this idea that, you know, that America is this great country and it has always been that way when like clearly it hasn't been. Like lots of people praise FDR's New Deal, but in actuality, the New Deal completely did not benefit African Americans at all. It actually was detrimental to African Americans and put us even further down. So I think it's really important that we're learning about this. And I think it's really sad that I didn't learn about it in school, where is like the place that access to this information is the most easy for me. I think not everyone has the opportunity and has the time to just, you know, like pick up a book and spend all the time reading it. And I'm very grateful for that I had this opportunity, but it's kind of hard to realize that it took this whole program to actually learn about this. And I think that's why we're doing this, just to make it easier for everyone else and like, you know, spread all that we're learning.
One of our comments asks, what steps can we make to change the future so that we don't repeat history? And that is a great question. I'm not quite sure yet what steps we can take to change the future so that we don't repeat it. But I think being informed on it will help us better understand so that we don't repeat it. I think knowledge is a power, and just learning and knowing your history so much to the point where you're like, oh, I know not to do this because I remember what happened last time, will just change everything. It will empower so many people and change so many lives.
I think what we can do to help change the future so we don't repeat history is, again, just arming ourselves with these knowledge, using these weapons that we have. I think that's the biggest thing that we can do to arm our youth so that they are prepared for the future. They'll be the leaders of the future, and we can change the future. I think if we are arming ourselves with these weapons, we're going after ourselves, we're going together as a community. And yes, Lena, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I did. Ure said that the youth is the leaders of tomorrow, but the leaders of tomorrow, like, they don't know. So in the future, they're not really going to do much to change anything. The things that are still affecting us if they don't know about it. You know what I mean? So without knowledge, like, you're never really going to want to change anything if you don't know the thing that can be changed.
I think personally it starts with schools. Like, it starts with our teachers taking the time to, one, get to know us on an individual level and to be able to have these kinds of conversations intellectually without it being a battle in the classroom. And then I think something interesting that I've read about, because I'm interested in architecture particularly, is mixed income housing. So instead of like completely gentrifying neighborhoods, they place some middle class housing and keep the low income housing and kind of renovate it so it meshes together. And there's definitely a lot of pros and cons to it. But I do think that it is somewhat better than completely displacing entire neighborhoods. And it's just something interesting to think about. I don't know. And it sounds better in theory. Maybe it wouldn't work in practice, but it's interesting to me.
Okay, ready to start off for our next question. What is something that you learned from the book that you were completely shocked about and that you did not know about, Selena?
Well, I knew like the principles of the book. What I was surprised by was like the amount of intention and like the amount of effort that white people put into keeping us down. We could have had such like a much better world if Black people and just other like people of color were allowed to reach their full potential. And I didn't know that like the amount of time, effort, like that really went into it. I knew it happened, but I didn't really know the intricate details of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I also have to agree with her. I was shocked also about how they really did try really hard with all those the laws that to they put in place to keep us out. And um yeah, like the things and then when our African American people came into the white neighborhoods, all of the things that they were doing to them just to like they were throwing the rocks and breaking their windows, and then how the family stayed there for 4 years even though they were going through all of that. And that was just shocking to me. I would have to leave if um they were doing that to me. I wouldn't want to stay there, but they are strong for that. And yeah, that was what shocked me most about that book. Yeah.
For me, like Jordan said, what shocked me most was that even though these families were really going through it with little children with them, like it wasn't just a mother and father. It was they had little children who probably weren't even in school yet, living in these houses, and people are throwing rocks. So the kids were fearful of maybe going outside because they could get hit with a rock upside the head. That's so scary. And thinking about myself and my own family, and if my parents put me through that, I would be ready to leave. I would be like, Dad, get me out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. Why are we still staying where people don't want us? I would just be so confused. And at such a young age, like I don't understand how they did it. They have so much strength for that. I commend them for that very much.
Yeah, same.
I definitely think like I was not ready, or I feel like with the education that I grew up with, which I did go to a private Catholic school in elementary school. I went to a private Catholic elementary school. I definitely just like got an education that was not up to the right standard. I learned lots of things that were very like off-putting, things such as like people who are slaves likes to be slaves, and just like lots of things that were completely wrong and not true. And over time, I definitely, just like what my parents tell me, I definitely learned that all the things were not true. And I think just the fact that there are so many like laws in place, like the government, like the things that the government did to put Black people down, it was out of pure hate and colonialist values that are not true. And I think it's just like completely horrible that those things were ever put into people's heads.
I think in the book they give us a lot of dates, right? So a lot of this stuff was happening not that long ago, like 70, 80 years ago was not that long if you put it into perspective of like American history. So they had like Shelley versus Kramer was a court case, like a Supreme Court case that happened in the 1950s. And that's finally when they said that segregated housing was unconstitutional. And it took them, what, like 9 years to even settle the court case. So it shows you that you're going to see a lot of it still today because it wasn't that long ago. People act like it was centuries in the past and that we should be perfectly fine now. But that's not the case. People are still alive from when this was happening.
Yeah. My dad was like, he's like older, but he was like one of the first people in Virginia Beach to be going to integrated schools. And like he's my dad and I'm a high school student. So when you really think about it, it was not that long ago. But I saw a comment that said, like, when should parents talk to their kids about redlining? And my parents, they always told me that I have to work twice as hard to get half as far because of my race. So it was more about the awareness of it when you're growing up. Like, every Black kid should know their history. I think that as soon as you're old enough to understand, you should know the basics of it. And I also think that everyone should also read Color of Law too, because the amount of things that I didn't know, the amount of American history that I missed out on at the ripe age of 16, something that never should have happened. So, yeah.
I think a good age to start having these conversations with your kids is honestly as early as possible. I know with my parents, it was very pushed. And I remember I was going through a bookshelf and I saw this book, and I remember my mom used to read it to me every day. And it was a book like, your hair is beautiful, your skin is beautiful, you're empowered, you're smart, you're all these different things. And when I looked back and I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, you were really reading this to me every day? She was like, yes, because I already knew what the world was going to try to dish to you. And I felt like I had to tell you differently. And I feel like when you arm your child with that knowledge, when you arm your child with those affirmations, I feel like, the world is never going to be too rough on them. I mean, it is, but your child is going to be ready and armed. Let's go ahead and transition to our next topic. Ziani Lee, would you like to start out with this? Why do we need to be educated on these topics? I think that's a great way to flow.
Yes. So that's a great question. Why do we need to be educated on these topics? I think that we need to be educated on these topics because as Black people in America, it is imperative and it's so important to understand why we live the way that we live. And it's not just because we're like how the white people perceive us to be dirty, nasty people. We live like that in the slums because we did not have the resources. We didn't have the ability to buy brooms and buy a whole bunch of cleaning supplies to make sure our house was nice and tidy and clean. And plus we had like 10 plus people living in our houses that everyone would chip in to pay for the mortgage that was way too high.
I think it's definitely really important for people to be educated as early as possible, because today, like when kids go to schools, they're going to see that lots of maybe the janitors will be African Americans and the teachers will all be like white women. And I think that can put lots of things into young kids' minds that really should not be there. But it's not their fault for thinking that because it's what they see. And I think it's just so important to go to the roots of why this is a thing, because I feel like it could definitely put into the mindset that we have this issue because Black people are lazy and poor, when actually it is pure government interference that made us this way. We were forced on boats to come over here. My dad is from Nigeria and my mom is from Trinidad, so lots of the experiences I'm very lucky to have lots of culture. But I think it's horrible that it's very stripped from us Black people, and I think it's so important to learn about it as much as possible.
We will now be taking a quick intermission. Or not. Okay, we're just ready to pursue our knowledge tonight. We don't even want to take a break. Oh my goodness. Okay.
So what are some common misconceptions you see in redlining and the throughout redlining? What are some common misconceptions that you see attached to redlining as well? So when you're looking at the redlining map and you're thinking about the neighborhoods those are and the environment that it is.
Hey, Jordan, did you have any ideas to add about common misconceptions?
Um,
Well, I had some ideas about the misconceptions. When you're looking at the redlining map and you see all the different areas that it is, you can see that a lot of those areas are perceived as ghetto places, or like really just a lot of high crime over there. And so I think that the way that the government did it and the few resources that are over there, it really gives that misconception of how awful the neighborhood is.
So I think adding on to what you said, like these areas, they a lot of them do have higher rates of crime, but you have to understand it's because of what the government did. If you have no resources, no food, and you lack money because you had to pay extra mortgages on your house, what are you going to do? Like, what are you supposed to do? You have a family to provide for. You have these people saying that they would do anything and everything for their family, but when you turn around and actually do anything and everything, they have a problem.
Hey, Jordan, did you have your thoughts together now, or did you still need a second?
I need a second.
Gotcha. Okay, let's see what another one of our scholars has to say. Hey, Ure, did you have any other thoughts about the misconceptions?
I think one of the big misconceptions is just what's given to us by our government and some of our leaders. Just some of the words that are used to describe Black individuals, and the idea that Black unity and Black prosper is anti-American. We see lots of stuff in the media that goes into the idea that we need to keep this. I don't want to. Critical race theory is a very complicated thing that I do not completely understand, but it is a term that is being thrown around a lot. And I think it's really scary that at the basis, people think that Black education should be put out of schooling. And I think it's really important that we do learn about it. And I don't think it is anti-American at all. I think people think that any idea that America is against, like, is not perfect, because it is not perfect at all. But the idea that it isn't is like anti-American is like horrible. We built this country and we're here and we're living. We've been through so much. I think the fact that we're like still here and like we're still like doing great and we can have these conversations is so like perfect. And yeah.
Okay, so I think we're actually ready for our intermission this time. So we'll be back in about 10 or so seconds. Hey, everyone. Also, a quick reminder, don't forget to like and subscribe and show us some love in the comments. We really love to see that. We love when you're interactive with us. So again, just like, subscribe, and follow Clever Communities in Action.
Okay, I just want to say a little something about the misconceptions thing. A misconception, like I've noticed, the theme that I've noticed is like a lot of non-Black people think that Black people don't get that far because they're not working hard enough. But when you really think about it, it's like, what do we really have to work with? Like, we get less opportunities. We don't come from a place with a lot of them, so it's like, well, what are we really supposed to do? Like, obviously, we're trying our best. We're doing the best we can to put food on the table, but at the end of the day, like, um, we can't all be like lawyers when no one wants us to be lawyers.
Okay, so we had a longer intermission planned, but I think we should just like talk a bit about each other. Kennedy, I know you're going to Howard and HBCU. Can you tell us a bit about your process of like wanting to go there and like what you're expecting?
HBCUs have always been a part of my life, always been a part of my family. My grandparents met each other at a HBCU at Elizabeth City State University. My mom also attended Howard University, so I already knew, it was HBCU or nothing at all. I'm really excited to just have that sense of community, be around Black people and Black kids who are empowered, who have the same goals as me, and are ready to go out into the communities and make a difference in this world. And I think, that's super important to see. So yeah, I'm super excited.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that I'm looking into an HBCU. My dad went to Howard, my mom went to Hampton, and I really just want a community. I think lots of us law scholars have had some, like problems with our schools that we go to now, whether it be like a primarily white one or just some like encounters. Selena or Deani Lee, do you guys might want to talk about that?
Oh, going to a predominantly white high school or middle school or anything like that. I went to a predominantly white high school, Grassville High School, and it was an experience. I'm glad I had it, considering the school I'm going to now, George Mason University. It really teaches you to find your community, because when you don't find your community, it's hard to, you can kind of start to lose your identity when you're surrounded by people who don't look like you, may not necessarily act like you. It makes you rethink who you are as a person and how you should act and be. But I'm really glad that I had a strong community going to Grasswood High School, knowing who I was and knowing who I wanted to be. And I'm just so blessed. And talking about HBCUs, my mother, she went to Norfolk State. She just texted me and was like, "Let them know I went to Norfolk State University," because she loves to shout it out any chance she gets. She had a blast. She talks about it all the time. She's a little disappointed when I chose not to go, but I think she got over it pretty quickly because we both are so in love with my school. It has a really great community there for African American people, and I'm so excited to get there and dive in and just really embrace who I am and not hide at all.
Both my sisters and my parents, they all went to HBCUs, and they always talk about like the kind of energy that comes with it, like the kind of like family community that you can't really have anyone else, or like that they can't get anywhere else. And I really want to have that kind of experience too. And I am really excited to start thinking about stuff like that. So.
A commenter has asked, how important do you feel that adults study and understand who you are? Selena, did you have any thoughts or ideas around that comment?
I think that it's important for any teenager to have adults that understand them. But when it comes to being a Black teenager, it's a lot different because most of the time, like our like the adults around us, like in school and things like that, like they're not going to be Black and they're not going to understand or cater specifically to the experiences that we might have had. And I think that's really important in growing up because you don't get that kind of like comfort that we all deserve. And so, yeah.
I think it's very important to understand these topics, especially as an adult, but more so thinking of like teachers, because these issues affect a lot of Black youth, and then you have teachers who don't understand these topics, who aren't educated in the slightest about these topics, and you have your students going through these issues, and then you can't understand your student one-on-one. And then if you add stereotypes and implicit bias to the mix, then your students just aren't going to be successful because they don't have somebody that they can go to. They don't have somebody that understands them.
Yes, I definitely. Go ahead, Jordan.
Sorry. I was gonna also add on to that with the what you're saying about the teachers. So like basically the white teachers, they can't connect with us more because they're white and we're Black, and we
Do you think it's because we go through more things than they ever will have
Yeah.
to go through in their life? And it's not to say we want them to experience how we feel and the fear of maybe being pulled over by a white police officer and not knowing what's happening next. It's the fact that we want them to be able to understand and to acknowledge it, not just to shy away from it and be like, oh, like it's no big deal when it is. It's something that needs to be addressed and spoken out loud. But is that what you were trying to say? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, yeah. That is.
Ura, did you have anything else to add to the discussion?
I think, like me and Calissa, we went to ODS, which was a gifted middle school. And I remember when I went there, I was like, I'm so smart because I'm gifted and stuff. One of the main things I realized was that there were like no Black people there. And I remember asking like my principal there that, and like the answer she gave me was like, Black people usually don't apply. And I think like something that I realized was just like there's just so many things wrong with like our education system. It's not perfect. I think it's still like better than many other countries, but I think the fact that giftedness had a correlation with whiteness, like giftedness and whiteness, it means there's something wrong. There is no inherently racial biological ties to intelligence. And like when I went there, like the education I got was very good. It was I really enjoyed it there, but I think the lack of diversity and the lack of just truthfulness to why I'm put there and what giftedness is just really skewed like lots of things.
So
Definitely.
sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say one of our viewers asked the question, how do we encourage conversations like these on individual family levels? On an individual
so I was
family.
about to answer that question.
Okay.
I was about to answer that question. I think, I don't know, it's kind of difficult to talk about these sorts of situations with your family. I know for me, because my dad, he's a lot more traditional, so having conversations about my kind of viewpoints is difficult for us to have. But I think just sitting down with your children and being open to what they are saying, like don't put down what your child is saying, just listen to them, listen to their side. If you want to add your perspective and your experience at the end of it, that is perfectly fine. But allow them to think freely. And that's really all you can do, even if the topic is hard. If you can really spring it out of nowhere, it doesn't matter when, where, or why you're talking about what you're talking about. It's just important to have the conversation in general.
I agree with that. I think that as children, as the next generation that's going to be into power, we have a lot of different ideas, but at the end of the day, like we are the future, and we're just trying to do. We are like pointing out the things that have wronged us, our parents, our grandparents, that we can make a better society.
Yes, I agree with what everybody has said so far. And another one of our viewers has asked, do you think teachers need to be taught more of our heritage in the schools? And I think that yes, that's definitely something that needs to be addressed and more talked about. Just saying that we're from Africa and that we were slaves and now we're not. That's not saying anything. That's just saying at one point in time you had us work for you and enslaved us, and now we're free, quote unquote. But that's another talk for another discussion. Anyone else have anything on that question?
Yeah.
I did. I think it's really important that we're being taught our heritage, our history, and just more about ourselves all year long, not just Black History Month, which I'm very grateful for. But I think oftentimes when we think of history in schools, we think about George Washington, we think about Paul Revere, but we're missing out on key people like Martin Luther King, Gwendolyn Brooks, all these different influential artists and Black people who have really paved the way for other Black people and for white people, Americans in general. Those people are missing. Those people are missing in our schools. So I noticed that when you neglect that part of history, Black students can think that it never happened. And I do think, again, teachers need to be taught to teach these things in our schools.
Yeah, a lot of times like Black kids like they feel like detached from their culture because they never really like learned it. I feel like African American is a whole different culture than just like African. It's not just that we're missing out on. We're not learning about all the struggles that we went through as a community.
Yeah, I think we learn about lots of random white guys, just to put it like straight out there, that are just not that important. And I think the fact that like if we're talking about heritage, like I think the most important part is just like there's also predominantly Black schools, and Black people are a big part of America. And I think when we omit that education from like our system and we put in stuff like I'm in like an AP Psych class, and we learn lots of things that are completely centered around old like just white American individualist values. And I think it's just so important that we like try to change that, because it's not up to date to like what we're learning today and how America looks today. I think it's just really important that like the education that we're learning co-aligns with the people that are in the classroom, because just learning about like European history, like of course it's important and very interesting, but I think the fact that there wasn't like some schools don't have an African American history class. Like there's in like AP Euro, but like there's like that's completely crazy that African history is completely like just not there. I think that shows a lot from just like an education standpoint.
I I want to add on to that because I took AP US history this year, right? And tell me why we only learned Black history for a week. We learned about civil rights for a week, and then we never talked about it again. Like that was it. And I don't even remember much of what we talked about except that there were like protests and everything. We didn't learn any names. We didn't learn any leaders. We learned that we watched but one video maybe, and that's it. And then all the other years in history, you're learning about the same couple of leaders, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X. Those are great people. I'm not putting them down by any means, but why are we only learning about three people? There are so many other people that have contributed to where we are today and to where we're going to go. Yet we know nothing about them.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
the opportunity to take an African American history elective was given to me like this past year. And like someone said like there's like that might be a class, but there's no like AP class for it. And I think that says a lot maybe about who the AP like program is trying to pull in. But I just think like definitely what Calissa said, like there's definitely lots of people we should be learning about. Like I remember asking questions and my teachers just not knowing about it. Like we learned about Harlem, New York, and I remember having so many questions about the culture, and my teacher knew nothing about it. And then when we went into Euro, she was so obsessed with like guillotines and like all the fancy dresses, and I'm like, that's so cool, but like that won't pertain to me. And I know some of the kids in the class, like my grandma, sorry, okay, like my grandma's from Italy or my grandpa's from France. Like that is so cool, but I want to have the opportunity to really engage and delve into my culture in a school setting. And I think it's so cool that we have this and I'm learning about it. But school is where I'm with my peers and where I'm supposed to have good relationships with my teachers, and everything is like really important.
No, yes, I completely agree with that, Ure. And one of our viewers said, "Do you feel cultural responsive teaching is important, and why?" I'm not quite sure, to be quite honest, what you mean by cultural responsive teaching. I'm thinking you mean the the teaching style need to incorporate all different cultures, and if so, I think that yes, it's very important. But if anybody else knows what we mean by the question or have any input, please go ahead.
I think it'd be better to let the viewer rephrase what they're trying to say. because I don't want to put words into somebody else's mouth. But Jaimir asked, do you believe that this course would be taught effectively in schools if it is put in? So, like, you mean an African American history class, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think it would be effective, but they're putting it into school. They are putting it into schools just this year, but it's only an elective. It's not a core class. So,
There,
like,
for my school district, Chesapeake Public Schools, I think that they're putting it in as an AP course, I believe, or something like, or an actual
oh, that's
class.
cool.
Well, not AP,
Okay.
but I think they're putting it in as an actual class that you could take, not an elective. But I
Well,
could be completely wrong. But either way, I think even if it is as an elective, I think it's good to have out there because right now we can't make it a requirement because of everything going on and too many people, especially being down south, a lot of country people who don't want that being taught to their children at all. So having that there as an elective for kids, and it's better when kids actually want to go into a class and do that. When you're picking an elective, it's not because you have to take it, it's because you want to take it. So I think that makes it all the more better because you're having kids in that class who want to learn about it and are ready to learn about it and are ready to hear important known facts that have been hidden from them.
I disagree a bit. Like, having the choice is awesome, but honestly, if not when, like, if not now, when are we going to teach kids this history? If we're not putting it into the curriculum, requiring it for the curriculum, when are we going to learn this? Because they're forcing white history down our throats. So I don't see the reason why we can't teach Black history in school. I don't care what other people think. I don't care how somebody down south thinks about teaching something in the school. We need to learn a lot of these things now because we're going on generations and generations, and we're moving too slow to fix these things.
Yeah, I think I completely understand, Deani, like where you're coming from. I think making it a choice would be like a very easy transition, but I think we've been making it easy for them for too long. Like I took AP Euro just because I needed an AP course. It was the only one available at the time, and I could not care less about it. Like I think I learned some stuff about communism and socialism, and that was very interesting, but I could not care less about it. And I think it's very important because there are definitely people who really need to hear about it. And like going back to the fact that you could see when you go into Norfolk, like where we were learning on our Saturdays, and see how poor it is, like how poor the infrastructure is there. Like we went to Tidewater Park and those people's homes are getting torn down. And I feel like if you just took a child and you walked through these areas, made them see that all their janitors are Black or all their teachers are white, all these things are going into their head, and the education is not like the education like isn't being given to them in the place that's easiest, which is school. But I know Jordan, you had something to say about a previous question.
Um, I did, but I'm gonna answer John Mayer's question that he just had about the efficiency. Yeah, I think it would, especially if a Black teacher is teaching it, the kids um benefit from it more than like getting taught from a white teacher. Because usually when you're getting taught by a white teacher, you're like, what is this white lady like telling me? Or yeah, it's usually a female, but like I don't want to listen to her because she's white and she don't know how I'm being treated and stuff like that. And so if we're being taught by a Black teacher, we could get deeper connection with them. And yeah, we could like it would be more efficient. And yeah, what Ure was saying about if you take a kid like out to those parks, they would like I think they just like they would see, wow, this is like other people's and this is how they're living. And if I could be better and do better in school, I could go out there and get me a good job so I won't have to live like this. And so I could put myself in a better situation than what these people have to go through.
I agree. And we have another question from one of our viewers asking, how can we encourage people to come and learn about our heritage and history from our fellow Black contributors? So from like in a previous question, she asked the same thing from like our HBCUs. How do we get kids to want to go there and for them to learn about their heritage and their history?
I think that I've always tried to educate people. For like a long time, I've been around like majority white people due to like where I lived, and I've definitely gotten away from being around like certain groups of people that have beliefs like so different than me that it like tears me down. And I think something that I've learned is that empathy, like when all the George Floyd stuff was happening, people really tried to like make it like this is our skin color. Like it's so important to us, and I think it's not hard for any of us to understand why that's horrible. But I think especially like from the books that we're reading that gives us like facts, like some people, especially when we see like politicians, they like skew this like random stuff out, but when you hear the facts, you can't deny it. And I think a great way to bring people in would be just to like state the facts and bring them in with empathy and like our personal opinions about it. Because I think some people do respond very well to empathy, but some people don't. And I think it's just really important to try to get it from every way.
Yeah, also, I think that the people who want to learn about it, they will, but the people who need to learn about it, like that's where it matters, like in the school, like yes, in the community, like that's where it should start, but a lot of times it won't. People will like purposely not teach it to their kids. So I think that in a mandatory setting, then once they learn it from there, then maybe they'll want to learn more so that they can be more of a help. But yeah.
Those are some great responses. A question that we have from Deja Bandy is, how do you think people can be an ally for the Black community?
Y'all, can I answer this? Okay. I think as long as you are actually willing to go out and educate yourself, you have started your journey to being an ally. But you have to make sure that you are listening to Black people. You're not going out and listening to what other people are saying. You are listening directly to the source. And then I personally, this is my ideology. I can't speak for everybody, but I don't think any question is a bad question or a stupid question, as long as you are asking it genuinely and you are open to hearing the answer. If you are going to debate the answer that you asked a question to, then you shouldn't be asking the question because you already have your answer clearly. So just be genuine, really.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate that.
Be an ally.
All I have to say is snaps, girl.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Well, that was our last question. Thank everyone so much for tuning in. Do we have any closing remarks from any of our scholars?
Thank you guys.
Yeah. Just thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Yes. And don't forget to share, tell a friend, tell your friend to tell a friend, get the word out. We're young, we're Black, we're educated, and we're shutting it down.
Yeah, hold up.
Yes, we'd like to end with something that we always do at one of our meetings. Let's end with our Law Scholar Creed.
Wait, y'all, before that, I'm sorry. Make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to Clever Communities in Action. Tell a friend, tell everybody, email somebody. I don't care. Let the people know.
Cop the merch.
And make sure you come to our show next week. It's the same time, same place. Tell more people. We want to see more people next week. Thank you.
Definitely. Now let's end with the creed, everyone.
And before y'all leave, let's watch our creed.
I am a law scholar. I am a powerful force.
I use literacy as a weapon for liberation.
I use literacy as a weapon to uncover hidden truth. I am a young change agent. I have been handed the baton by my ancestors. I have the support and protection of my community. I am an asset to my community.
I understand that I have the responsibility to empower my community as I choose my path in life.
I am a law scholar, and I use literacy as a weapon to change the world.